Hello and welcome. Today I'll be making some Nurglings. Now what I have here are two different Nurgling sets made many years apart. It's the same model, but the construction is different. So the manual is only going to be able to help me for one kit. The other kit I'm going to have to figure out on my own. Luckily it turns out I don't actually need the manual. The bases of the Nurgling models all fit together like puzzle pieces, so all I had to do was get the right ones next to each other and then I could easily build the model without the manual. Since gluing the model together right now will cause nothing but trouble and difficulty in the painting process, what I am going to do is I'm going to attach them to a piece of blue tape, and it'll keep it together and I'll be able to separate it or bend it, the tape, so I can easily get around the model for ease of painting. The book shows what they would look like if they were real. Their flesh is very diseased and rotting, and the models have way too clean and smooth skin for that, so we need to fix that. So we're going to take some Liquitex modeling putty and just some basic average model glue. We're going to take the two and we're going to mix them together to create a quick drying paste that will harden and will adhere heavily to the plastic. And we're going to add this on all over the models in the areas to give it a nice fleshy texture. Using a stippling brush, we're going to go over all the places where we applied the putty, and we're just going to stipple everywhere to get a very nice consistent texture. Now with all the models having texture applied, it's now time to prime. Using some blue tape, I'll create a sticky base to attach all the models to so they don't blow away when I prime them. My preferred primer of choice is Bright Touch Car Primer for general purpose, the gray color specifically. It comes in white and black, but I like this because it establishes a very strong grip on the model. After priming, the texture looks great on the models. It looks like their flesh is diseased and their skin is falling off. This looks great. And a quick trim around the base for ease of painting. And now with yellow ochre ink, we're going to create the depth and the shadows. And now with pallid witch flesh, we will now create the highlights of the model. And now with White Scar White, we're going to dry brush the entire model. This will heavily pick out the rotted flesh and stuff. It's going to stick out even more. Now we'll be using Druchii Violet to spray directly into the dark shadows, the very lowered areas, or places where you could think there'd be a lot of bruising. Using Fugan Orange, we will now airbrush the skin around the open wounds for discoloration. Now with the contrast paint Plague Bearer's flesh, we're going to go all over the skin, including the places where we painted orange or dark blue, all the shaded areas. We're going to avoid the internal organs, and we're going to avoid the horns. And now with the contrast paint Guilliman flesh, we're going to paint over all the horns on the model, all the bone, as well as the organs and the tongues. Now with Skeleton Horde contrast paint, we'll go over all the horns and the teeth again. And now with Magos Purple contrast paint, we're going to paint all the tongues and the intestines and organs sticking out of the models. Now back to Fugan Orange, we're going to use it to put into each and every single eye socket, as well as around the lips on the mouths of the models. Using this bone color that I can't pronounce, we will use this in order to paint the eyes. Now using Baylor Brown, we will use this and a fine brush to pick out the tiny little teeth on all the models. Back again at Fugan Orange, and we will use this wash to highlight the boils on the models. And now with Bestigor Flesh, we do a final highlight on each of the boils with it. And now we varnish the whole model. Now using Blood for the Blood God technical paint, we will now paint in all the open sores, blood around the lips, organs, or the open sore holes, blood around there, blood around where the cavities are. And this is also a good chance for a lot of mistakes or accidents or places we missed with paint to go over that with the blood effect in order to cover it up. Instead of redoing it, this allows me to paint over and give it more character. Mistakes can be turned into character. So it's really good to have several types of paints or stuff that you can go back over the models that can add character. Battle damage, gore, blood, whatever. And I highly recommend this practice, as it is both time saving and relaxing. It's more enjoyable to paint instead of always dreading a single mistake. You can easily just go back and just have fun with it. And now with Liquitex Gloss Varnish, we'll use this to pick out the boils and the organs, make them look wet and ready to burst. Going back once again to Baylor Brown. Now this model is interesting. There is a little part where the model sits on like pre-made ground that will go into the base. So since my base is going to be painted with Baylor Brown, this part's going to stick out. So I'm going to paint this Baylor Brown and then attach it to the base, which will already be painted Baylor Brown. We will coat the base with Liquitex modeling putty. Now using super glue, I'm going to attach the model together. I like this particular type of super glue because it has this nice handy brush which allows me to accurately and easily paint essentially the places that I want to stick together. Now when the putty on the base is mostly dry, the outside will be hardened a bit, but the inside will be soft, allowing it to be bent. So I will take the Nurgling model and I will begin to press it and indent it on it in order to make an impression on the base so the model is flush with it. Since the Nurglings are essentially treading the earth and being stuck on the ground, I wanted to make it look like they're wading through, making an impression on the ground. So the ground in front is going to be building up and the ground behind them is going to be flattened. Once the putty is completely dry, I take a Dremel drill head and I drill a hole through it. I then take the Nurgling base and place it on the top, and then from the bottom I drill in to score the exact location where the hole is on the Nurgling base. Normally I would drill onto the model and then impress it on there, but because of the fact that the model itself has ground attached to it and stuff, and I wanted to make it look good, I had to do this kind of backwards roundabout way to make it look right or work. Using Vallejo Natural Umber pigment paints, I then mix this with alcohol, isopropyl alcohol. It seems to make it very smooth and easy to work with, and then I just paint it all over the base and to get it flowing into all the cracks and stuff to make it look like natural earth. Be careful though, because you'll take off the paint from the previous step. Using Liquitex matte varnish for its really nice glossy sheen, I have no idea why, but I coat the whole base and it's sealing in the pigment powder so it doesn't fly everywhere, and once it's dried it looks like this wet and moist ground. Now using Nurgles Rot, we're going to use this to cover the base in many areas where, like, the matte varnish has pulled up too much or such and such, or any little mistakes we find on the ground. This is good for covering up and adding character to it. And finally, using Abaddon Black, we will now paint the entire rim of the base. And finally the model is done. Now some key things to take away is the Blood for the Blood God and Nurgles Rot were very useful for covering up mistakes made, or for just places I missed covering. They made it very fast, easy, and simple, and added a lot of character. Another thing that is important to note is that less is more. The main models are green, and so I didn't want the green flesh to be overpowered by the red colors or any other colors. So minimalist, very little red on it. I don't want the whole, each whole Nurgling covered in a huge red blotch. Just a tiny little bit of red covering its skin, and of course the blood and other stuff. And apart from that, It looks really good. I'm pretty happy with it. Alright, now moving on to another kit in the box. See you later. Bye.